So our first stream this morning is navigating changes in standards, and Stuart McConnell is Technical Officer and Trainer at the Master Plumbers Association of Queensland. Now let me tell you a little bit about this gentleman standing on the stage. Stuart has undergone extensive professional training as a gas engineer in the UK, successfully running a plumbing and heating company before moving to Australia. Stuart has a strong commitment to fostering a comprehensive understanding of plumbing and gas practices, which is evident in his role at MPAQ. So can we give him a nice warm welcome? Stuart.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'll just push these up slightly, it's a bit tall. All right, good morning. Welcome to day number 2. As Lee's already said, I'm Stuart McConnell. I'm a Technical Officer and Trainer here at Master Plumbers. I'm used to about 10 or 20 students, so I'm a little bit flustered. The nerves have come through a little bit today. I'd like to thank Master Plumbers for giving me the opportunity to come up. They didn't really give me much choice, but we're here. There's been a few more grey hairs added to the mix as we've on the lead up to this. So I've got around 20 years experience on the tools, 8 of which have been here in Queensland. The last 2 with Master Plumbers. Coming from a trade background, I've struggled when I first came into this role with organisation, paperwork, all the stuff that hands-on tradies struggle with. I was told a good 6 months ago that I'd be up here doing a presentation, so I thought I'll get into it, I'll schedule my time, I'll get something really organised. Fast forward to last night. Anyway, fast forward to last night. I'm up in the room, overthinking everything, struggling, getting a little bit anxious. I was a few beers deep as well, which didn't really help. So moving on, the presentation really needs to start in 2023 to get a good grasp of where we're at here in 2024 and what a year 2023 was. The World Health Organization finally declared an end to the COVID-19 pandemic, which was great. India overtook China to become the most populous country in the world. Artificial intelligence entered the room. A great speech earlier from our colleague. Shout out to ChatGPT for putting together these slides for me last night. So yeah, all jokes aside, the National Construction Code came into effect in 2022. That's not a typo, no, we're talking about 2023. Came into effect in 2023. And what it did is it called up some new deemed to satisfy provisions for the plumbing industry in the form of AS3500, part 0 through to 4. We were now on a 2021 edition. We also started exclusively using 5601 Part 1 2022. The end of our transition period occurred. So there was an awful lot of changes that led to a lot of confusion. My role as technical officer, I got an awful lot of phone calls to try and make head or tail of it. So I think what we'll do is we'll start off with the National Construction Code 2022. Just a prior warning, there's going to be a few acronyms today, so if you're triggered by them, I'll try and make out what they are. So NCC 2022 is our National Construction Code. The National Construction Code contains the building and plumbing requirements for new and renovated buildings here in Australia. The most important thing for that with regards to our industry is volume number 3, the Plumbing Code of Australia. This is the document that calls up our 3500s. We'll just have a quick brief rundown about the legislation hierarchy here in Queensland. The Plumbing and Drainage Act 2018 is the law governing plumbing and drainage here in Queensland. It covers the licensing of plumbers and drainers, on-site sewage facilities and various other matters. Coming in a hot second, we've got the Plumbing and Drainage Regulation 2019. This legislation documents the types of plumbing and drainage licences and the type of work that we can do. Next up, we've got the Queensland Plumbing Wastewater Code, which is designed to provide the performance solutions to meet the requirements of the Act. If we have a look at the legislation hierarchy here on this pyramid, you'll see the top of the pile there with the PDA, coming in next with the PDR, moving down with the codes, the Queensland Plumbing and Wastewater Code, the Queensland Development Code and the Plumbing Code of Australia. Right at the bottom there, you can see our deemed to satisfy provisions in the form of the 3500s. The plumbers go to what we would be referencing to kind of abide by all of the legislation above it there within the pyramid. So within Volume 1 of the National Construction Code, Part F2 covers wet areas and overflow protection. So even though it's not the Plumbing Code of Australia, it kind of fits in with our construction of bathrooms. Floor wastes were required to have a minimum grade around the floor surrounding them. We need a minimum grade in 1 in 80 and a maximum of 1 in 50. Floor wastes, just to give you a rundown though, are only a requirement in the following situations. So obviously in showers, we're fairly certain we're going to have a floor waste, that's fine. In a room containing a urinal, even in 2024, us chaps can still miss, so obviously they need provision to wash down that floor and obviously drain things away. The Class 2, 3 and Class 4 part of a building with a bathroom or laundry located above any sole occupancy or public space. Contrary to popular belief, floor wastes aren't mandatory in Class 1 buildings here in Queensland. Lots of feedback we were getting was that builders were trying to find alternative ways to discharge sanitary fixtures to the drain without the need of a floor waste gully. Around 4 months after the National Construction Code was launched, the Queensland Development Code 4.5 was published. I think it was September. And what it did is it had some additional compliance solutions. So at the beginning, I talked about that legislation pyramid. The Queensland Development Code allows us to amend and make changes fairly quick. Other codes and legislation take a long time to change. So I feel like some builders jumped up and down with regards to the floor wastes. How can we get around this? How can we get another solution? There is a section within Section 2, Part E, that says where there's a voluntary floor waste installed, that if we add the following measures, we can get away without grading the floor. So it gives us another option. Vessels such as basins and baths in the wet area must be provided with a built-in overflow. WCs within the wet area must have a built-in overflow that runs down to the pan. Flexible hose assemblies used for the connection of fixtures contained in the wet area must be fitted with a flood stop valve, and they've got to be approved under WMTS 479. I did have a little walk around the trade show yesterday and I saw that there was a few companies supplying those valves, so just be aware of it being tested to the correct watermark. As I mentioned, we had our 3500 2021 called up. The new 2021 edition, parts 0 through to 4. Most of the questions came from parts 1 and 2 as far as I was concerned. Part 1 mostly with regards to where's the backflow provisions gone. Generally they've been moved to, most of the details in there have been moved to the Plumbing Code of Australia now, so while you're on site you're probably going to be referencing a different document also. It kind of leads us into AS3500 Part 3, our backflow test appendices. It's not directly called up in the Plumbing Code of Australia. However, through 3500, the current version of that standard is called up. So as of the enactment of the National Construction Code, we also had a new backflow standard indirectly as well for our test appendices. Now, I'll leave my colleagues going to go through that next, so I won't go too far. But some of you are probably aware that the official Form 9 is still referencing 2010. I believe there's probably going to be an update very soon. Hopefully we can get an update on that. The main culprit for questions, as I said before, probably 3500 Part 2. Clause 4.9.1. Sorry, a bit behind on the slides. With regards to drains at grade and rolling of junctions 15 degrees. This was generating a lot of confusion. For new installations where a junction is used, the connection of a 100mm branch drain laid at grade, the branch should be elevated at an incline not less than 15 degrees above the horizontal. It was put in the standards to aid in the partial blockages of drains that were occurring. It was shown that with your drain on grade, when the toilet was flushed, that the force of it hitting the back of the junction, you could get toilet paper and other lovely stuff from the drain, travelling upstream, drying out, blocking up the drain, and obviously causing issues as we move forward. As you can imagine, it caused quite a few issues with two-storey buildings where you're restricted for space within your joists. That rolling of the junction another 15 degrees up really kind of made a struggle with space. So box-ins and bulkheads were used below to obviously accommodate the extra pipework and space. There's also been an awful lot of confusion around this clause. I'm aware that the Standards Committee is putting together some amendments on this. But just so you're aware, this is not a requirement on renovations or repairs to existing drains, and it's also not a requirement where there's no WC upstream of the junction. So if there's no toilet upstream of that junction does not need to be rolled 15 degrees. Just bear that in mind. September 30th of 2022, AS3500 was published. As Mr. Beaumont mentioned yesterday, we were given a 6-month transition period taking us through to March 30th, 2023. During that transition period, we were allowed to reference 2013 for any jobs that were ongoing. There was a bit of confusion through that time with people adopting the standard, as Paul mentioned yesterday. March the 30th, 2023, as I say, was the end of our transition period, and from that date onwards, we would be solely referencing Part 1 2022. March the 30th came, and the phone calls started. It was full on. We had confusion left, right, and centre. Even though we had 6 months to get organised, it wasn't quite the case. Again, it probably goes back to organisation skills of us being hands-on people sometimes. The Gas Inspectorate did put on some great roadshows and seminars, and we tried to engage and really talk about the changes and make sure everyone was aware of what was happening. The last change to 5601 was back in 2013, apart from a few amendments here and there. So as you can see, between 2013 and 2022, an awful lot was added. Multi-layer pipe seemed to be a hot topic. Restrictions on multi-layer pipe installs were everywhere, and a lot of feedback we got was that installers were heading back towards copper. There were lots of changes that we can probably harp on about now, but I'll focus on the ones that generated the most amount of calls. 4.2 and table 4.2, brazing being prohibited within 1 metre of a non-metallic component was quite a hot topic. The prohibition of any multi-layer pipe being external to the building also created an awful lot of confusion. Clause 5.2.11, the provision of fire emergency isolation for multi-layer pipe, as you're probably all aware, lots and lots of confusion, and the increased clearances between domestic cooking appliances and range hoods. So clause 4.2, table 4.2 and clause 5.2.12, so brazing, welding and annealing should be conducted in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications, but not less than 1 metre from a joint with non-metallic components. This includes consumer pipework external to a building, which should be metallic and extend at least 1 metre into the building. So as you can see on the diagram, any point that you've got, whether it be for a gas meter, a gas regulator, a cooktop, hot water system, barbecue, whatever it is, it needs to have at least 1 metre of metallic pipe, transitioning from multi-layer and coming out the wall in copper. Clause 5.2.12 provides a little bit of guidance around reversion fittings. Now, this is another thing that is a hot topic out there. If you look on any Plumbers Crack or Plumbers Brisbane pages, you'll find the usual suspects. Can anyone ID this pipe? What pipe's this? Where do I find the fittings? It's the usual story we get with PEX installs. So reversion fittings are a requirement. They do need to be installed if the main run exceeds 10 metres in length and that it's connected to at least one appliance, one or more appliances. The reversion thread should be a BSP thread, and they should also be in a fairly accessible location. In the main run, it should be immediately prior to the first branch, and it should also be immediately prior to the last branch takeoff within that system. I've got a couple of examples here of the reversion fittings from Elson. You can see in A there, we've got a couple of male threads with a flange union there, and we've also got a reversion copper fitting there, which should be installed. It's worth noting that the requirements for certifying compliance for all or part of a gas system installed are provided under Section 734 of the Petroleum and Gas Act and Section 95 of the Petroleum and Gas Reg. The certificate requires the installer to certify the gas system, and any work complies with all safety requirements. Now, 5601 Part 1 2022 is our safety requirement. It's our minimum standards within the legislation, so that's what we need to bring our system up to. Please note, if you do see multi-layer pipe coming out the wall external to a building or underneath a building, it's non-compliant. If you see multi-layer pipe coming out the wall underneath your cooktop or hot water system, again, it's non-compliant. So if you're going to try and write a gas certificate for that, you need to bring it up to the standard. Clause 5.2.11. The provision for multi-layer pipe to have fire emergency isolation. Now, if I had $1 for every time I spoke about this clause, I'd probably be sitting around the pool sipping the old mojitos, but it's not quite the case. The clause states the minimum requirements that we need for multi-layer pipe installs. The following requirements for the safety isolation valve shall apply. The gas installation should be fitted with a fire safety system that's linked in to your multi-layer pipe system by means of a solenoid valve. It does need to be a single Class 1 safety shutoff, and it's got to meet the requirements of AS3629. And what it will do is it will isolate the gas supply to that system It also needs to de-energise if there's a power cut. The valve shall operate when the active fire safety system operates and be located prior to any multi-layer pipe and be as close as practicable to the supply point for the building and obviously readily accessible. Right at the bottom of that clause is where we get any talk about excess flow valves. Now, obviously excess flow valves seem to be the biggest thing that everyone is harping on about, but they're a real afterthought. They're not really the best solution for what we're trying to achieve. Obviously, if you've got a fire in your house, you want any smoke or anything along those lines, signs of fire, you want the gas to be shut off. If you're waiting for your pipe to be melted by fire, you've got bigger problems on your hands, obviously. So yeah, look, it's only right at the bottom of that, and the excess flow valves are only an alternative for Class 1 buildings. Note number 3 states that the devices should automatically shut off the gas supply by methods of sensing pressure loss or an excessive gas flow. Note 4 states that the clause applies to the alteration of consumer piping using multi-layer pipe in an existing installation, but it does not apply to the replacement of a gas appliance in an existing installation. So if you replace a hot water unit and you don't alter any multi-layer pipe, you don't have to install your excess flow valve. If there is multi-layer pipe coming out the wall, however, and it's then breaching clause 4.2 because it's not a metre of pipe, and then you alter the multi-layer pipe installation, you're obviously going to need to bring it up to the current standard. Size in excess flow valves is the next big question, I guess, that we've had. So how do we establish what size we require for it? It's all down to the cubic meterage of gas that's going to flow through the valve. We need to establish how much gas is going to travel through that valve to see when it needs to shut off. In order to do it, we need to find out the megajoule load for the system, so we can simply add up all of our appliances. Then we need to divide it by the heat value or the calorific value of the gas type. So depending on whether you're on LPG or natural gas, it's going to differ. If you think about an LPG system, 96 megajoules per cubic metre is what we'd be looking at, 38 for a natural gas. For a 250 megajoule LPG system, we'd probably go for around 2.6 cubic metres of gas per hour. If we were to look at a natural gas system of the same size, we'd go for about 6.5 cubic metres of gas per hour. So there's a big difference in the amount of gas that we'll obviously run through. So it's super important, obviously, to know the system you're working on and pick the right valve. The next section is the orientation of the valve. Excuse me. Some can go horizontal, some are vertical only. If in doubt, please reach out. As a technical officer at Master Plumbers, we're here for these questions. So if you do get stuck, please reach out and we can try and figure it out. It doesn't stop there though, folks. Obviously there's also lots of questions around the need for multiple valves within the system. So with excess flow valves, the idea is to shut the flow of gas off, but that's only going to do that after a certain amount of gas passes through the valve. If you've got a multi-layer install with, say, a 1/2 inch line or a 15mm line dropping down to a cooktop, if there was a fire in the kitchen and it melted that pipe, is there going to be enough gas flowing through the 1/2 inch pipe to shut off the big old valve at the meter or the regulator? There's loads of different scenarios out there, but sometimes you might need to excess flow valves for it to work correctly. So just bear that in mind. It looks like we're getting towards the end of the session. Hopefully you've taken something away from today. There's an awful lot to try and cover and talk about, so I've tried to pick the main bits. Before I do disappear, I'd like to remind the men in the room to be very grateful today for wives, daughters, mothers, colleagues, and celebrate International Women's Day 2024. I'm not too sure where I'd be without my wife and my daughters. They keep me very grounded and, on the right track. So happy International Women's Day to all the women rocking it out there.